dominion, and all belong to God. He establishes order in the heights of heaven. Can his forces be numbered? Upon whom does his light not rise? What is man that you are mindful of him?
Having observed God's willingness to transform discrete territories and cultures, only one question remains. Can this happen at a national level? Is there any evidence of God at work in a modern state, a sovereign nation? The East African nation of Uganda seems an unlikely place to look for answers. Racked with demonic fevers, this one-time pearl of Africa has spent decades in a deep spiritual coma. Its very name has become synonymous with death. As the nursery of AIDS, and as Idi Amin's personal house of horrors.
I think Uganda has been a country of pain, a country which has gone through one military coup to another.
I know what it means to live in fear.
Pastor John Malindi was a teenager when the horror began.
People have been killed in thousands, massacres, whole villages being massacred. And sometimes you would not know exactly who is doing the killing.
Those who listen to John Malindi's vivid tales may squirm.
His body lay there for 2 days.
Or even weep.
And the baby had pulled out the breast of a dead mother.
But they will always remember.
We did not recognize what we were fighting against.
Uganda's history, like that of many African nations, is filled with magic practices and secret rituals. Fetishes known as Mayembe were everywhere. And kings, even to the days of Idi Amin, are known to have offered human sacrifices.
Africans are covenant people, if I may say. Much of what we have is covenanted to the devil.
Our history tells us that our ancestors worship other gods other than the God of Abraham.
For Uganda, the consequence of this idolatry has been a long season of fear and pain.
What I knew about Idi Amin was a towering figure with who wanted to throw around his weight and wanted his presence felt all over.
Journalist Mark Kukuza grew up under the shadow of Uganda's infamous tyrant. Like many of his countrymen, he was optimistic when Amin's overthrow led to the return of former President Milton Obote.
I'm now president. But they thought that maybe Obote would be better than Idi Amin, but it wasn't.
There were powers of darkness behind these people that you're looking at, which were tearing apart this nation. In those days, it was common to find bodies lying by the roadside, and sometimes people would go to look over just to make sure, is it a person I know, a loved one? If not, they would just go on.
And it wasn't just soldiers doing the killing.
I was born to die.
Pastor Jackson Sinyanga was just 3 months old when his mother threw him into the garbage.
And my grandma picked me up.
Assuming he would die within a matter of days, an aunt agreed to take him in. But the boy lived, if only to revisit the pain.
My father was murdered in '79 during Idi Amin. And at the funeral, that's when I first saw the picture or the face of my mother. Never a letter, never a picture, no nothing. And I was already a teenager.
Sadly, Jackson's father was part of a national epidemic.
1 day passed, 2 days without your loved one coming home. Then you know maybe he's dead. So the first place to go to would be Namave Forest. It was a forest of death. You could feel the spirit of death there, the heaviness of death.
Prayer meetings went underground. Pastors circulated between as many as 10 groups a day, always at great peril, and often arriving home in the wee hours.
The soldiers had power to do whatever they want. There would be road checks. I was stopped in road checks many times, and you would never know how you're going to come out.
On one occasion, a mother traveling with an infant was asked for the baby's identity papers.
And And of course, babies don't have identity papers. And the baby was snatched from her, thrown up into the air. And the soldier raised a knife, and the baby came and plunged on that knife. And by 1984, they began killing churchmen. They began killing pastors.
Pastor Jotham Mutebi was in the middle of a sermon when Amin's soldiers burst into his church with guns blazing. As the bullets tore through the sanctuary, several elderly women rose and made their way to the altar.
And when I saw them, I thought these people were so desperate and that they needed comfort. So I raised up my arms and prayed over them. But I came to learn later that the reason they came, they wanted to die with me, their pastor.
Instead, Pastor Mutebi and his parishioners were herded into hijacked trucks and taken to the dreaded Nakasero Center.
Just a few meters away from where we are was this Nakasero State Research Bureau. That was the torture chambers.
The sadism and violence were unspeakable.
You could put 60 people in a room that is just by 3 by 3 meters. And they are crammed in to the point that a person would die and stay upright, held up by the bodies of the other living ones. There were no investigations. Things would happen, and that would be the end of it.
It seemed the entire world had turned its back on the horrors in Uganda.
Men have deserted us.
Millions died, the bodies clogging the Owen Falls Dam and the shores of nearby Lake Victoria.
We need to repent for whatever sins of our past. We defile our country. We are not any better than Cain.
This preoccupation with killing took its toll on the nation's economy and infrastructure.
The factories broke down. Essential commodities became scarce and almost unknown.
You couldn't get soap, you couldn't get anything. The city was dirty, and most of your buildings were damaged.
The morals of the people were so broken that you could not get a single thing done without having to pay for it.
Just when it seemed things could not get any worse, they did. This time, the news was delivered by the World Health Organization.
It was being predicted that by 1997, AIDS would be so bad in Uganda that 1/3 of the population will have died.
Dr. Patrobas Mufubenga is an accomplished physician serving with Uganda's National Institute of Health.
During this time, everybody was desperate. All of us were losing our dear ones.
Uganda has been crying to God, just like the voice was heard in Lama, women crying for their sons.
The pain, the suffering, the sorrow, the fear, no one could console.
They developed a saying before that said that the God of Uganda had gone to sleep.
In the middle of the night, there's one old man who stood up and pointed his cane to the pastors and said, "Where is this God you preach about? God of power, God who answers prayer. What has Uganda done to God? It looks like God hates us."
From the depths of the grave I called for help, and you listened to my cry. I said, I have been banished from your sight, yet I will look again toward your holy temple. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you, Lord, and my prayer rose to you.
And they began praying day and night, day and night, day and night.